very welcome addition to Farnborough International 94 were appearances by nearly 30 historical aircraft, extending back 75 years to the first transatlantic and England-Australia flights. But first and foremost, the event is a showcase for the latest technology and display excellence by aircraft from the world over. We concentrate on the flying action in this video. Farnborough used to be reserved exclusively for British aircraft, and our aerospace industry is as successful as ever, although increased competition has fostered many international partnerships. The Royal Air Force can still boast the best aerobatic team, and there's room too in Britain for fledglings and innovators, but it's the international element which now sets Farnborough apart from other aviation events in the world. We look at the contenders for the Army Air Corps' new attack helicopter program to replace the Lynx. And military airlifters of the future was another significant theme of Farnborough 94. Passenger transport is a growing market, and the Airbus family has proved to be particularly successful, but strong competition is coming from the former members of the Soviet Union. Flying for fun and sport has attracted aviators from the very beginning, and we witnessed some world-class aerobatics at Farnborough, which included the Breitling World Cup. It's 50 years since the invasion of Normandy, which heralded the end of World War II, and many of the vintage gems on display reflected that important era in aviation. But the star of Farnborough for many was not actually there, well, not flying at least, but a quite magnificent combat simulator of Eurofighter 2000 gave us a foretaste of Farnborough's to come. We include some additional material with air-to-air sequences of this most important European newcomer. Aviation Action and Aviation Video Library are pleased to present Farnborough International 94. Farnborough International takes place every 2 years at the Defence Research Establishment's airfield in Hampshire. 5 trade days give way at the weekend to an even bigger public event encompassing the whole spectrum of international aerospace activity. Farnborough's status is enough to attract from all over the world the most modern and exciting aircraft and their potential buyers, and it's this element that sets it apart from the dozens of UK air shows every year. But it's not just aircraft. 4 huge exhibition halls house shop windows for 664 companies, and not just the biggest and best-known names in aviation, but a whole infrastructure as well. Engines and ejector seats, radars and recce pods, missiles and management systems, parachutes, paint and plastic plates. It's the big transport aircraft which catch the eye first, and after the giant Russians in recent Farnboroughs, it's a pleasure to see at very close quarters the huge C-5 Galaxy and the new Globemaster III strategic transports. At centre stage is apparently the prototype of a new airlifter, but closer inspection reveals it to be a most impressive, if wooden, mock-up. The FLA, Future Large Aircraft concept, is a European initiative intended to replace the C-130 Hercules and the Transall 160. None of these armoured vehicles can be lifted by the Hercules, and FLA's proponents make the very valid point that you shouldn't ask the Air Forces what aircraft they want, but rather the armies what loads they want lifting. The flight controls will be fly-by-wire, Airbus style, and the whole project management has received a boost by being taken up by the proven Airbus consortium. The Hercules is now 40 years old, and one idea for replacement is in fact a radical upgrade. The C-130J was also present in mock-up form, though rather smaller than the FLA. The most significant change would be in the engines and propellers. And so to the flying. Designed to fill US airlift needs until well into the next century, C-17 will carry 3 Bradley AFVs or an M1 MBT and other vehicles, plus crews and spare ammunition. Very advanced digital avionics in a 4CRT display glass cockpit cuts the crew down to 2 pilots and a loadmaster. It combines the capacity of the Galaxy and the short field performance of the Hercules. With reverse thrust, it can do a 3.180-degree turn on the Farnborough runway and back fully loaded up a 1 in 50 slope. The second of 3 Airbuses in the short to medium haul group and the smallest in the Airbus family, these are single-aisle aircraft, launched in 1994 by Lufthansa and Alitalia. This is the largest wide-bodied twin ever produced, with the new Rolls-Royce Trent 700, the first all-Rolls-Royce engine ever fitted to an Airbus. It's already in service with Air Inter and Aer Lingus. Two things distinguish the new Airbus generation: the incredible quiet of the engines and the computer-based fly-by-wire control system that permits this high angle of attack very slow pass. A340 is to the very long-range routes what A330 is to the shorter ones, and it's the first brand-new long-haul airliner in over 20 years. If you travel on a Virgin Atlantic 340, you can have video games and credit card gambling. Flying in the markings of Vnukovo Airlines, this is a brand new Russian offering for export. Certificated just before Farnborough, it has fly-by-wire and can be mated with Rolls-Royce or Pratt & Whitney engines, with Western avionics in the 6-colour display, so-called glass cockpit. This is the prototype of the smallest of the new airliners for Aeroflot and its heirs and assigns. Export deliveries are planned to start in 1995. Small though it is, the IL-114 is positively dwarfed by its big brother, the Ilyushin 96. This turbofan widebody stems from the IL-96-300. A much bigger aircraft, it has up to 440 high-density seats, or 386 in the comfortable version, with a 30-foot cabin extension and a top weight of 370 tons. Because it is intended to catch the Western market, it is offered with Pratt & Whitney engines and a complete Western avionics fit in a modern glass cockpit. To the obvious advantage of a very economical buy, the Russians add the lollipop of well-established and familiar Western equipment. The first Western order out of 25 firm with 15 options has already been announced. On finals now, a shape that needs no introduction. Concorde, beautiful Concorde, the only successful supersonic airliner in the world. It still turns heads and it still stops the traffic. And now for some history. In 1919, two Australian Air Force officers, Ross and Keith Smith, made the first flight between England and Australia. 75 years later, a replica built in California prepares to repeat the trip. The Vimy was seen off by a Qantas 747-400, sporting a unique and splendid Abo paint job. With the Vimy went a government aircraft factory Nomad, supplied for photo and baggage purposes by the Australian Army, which was to accompany the flight. The replica was allocated the same registration, supposed by Keith Smith to stand for God Help All of Us, and brakes and a tailwheel are concessions to modern airports. V8 Chevrolet racing engines are concealed under the cowlings, Eagle 8s being now in rather short supply. The Vimy set the scene for a cavalcade of flybys through the history of aviation. The Douglas Dakota, the universal aunt of the Allied forces, served everywhere and everybody, and 50 years after D-Day and Arnhem, it is still remembered. Air Marshal Tedder and Field Marshal Montgomery each received a personal Miles Messenger. This one, representing Montes, belongs to James Buckingham. In this Percival Gull 6, Jean Batten set up a series of astounding records in 1935 and 1936, including England-Brazil, England-New Zealand, and Australia-England. The Miles Magister was the first monoplane trainer adopted by the RAF, just as the first monoplane Hurricanes were joining Treble 1 Squadron. 1,400 Tiger Moths had been built when war broke out, rising to 7,300 at war's end. Now rare, it is the sort of thing you go to Christie's to buy. This is the oldest Chipmunk alive and the oldest aircraft in the RAF. It belongs to No. 6 Air Experience Flight at Benson. The Percival Prentice took over from the Tiger Moth. It had twice the Tiger's horsepower and weight, and a cockpit that held an instructor and 2 pupils. Now with University Air Squadrons, RAF Bulldogs were used first to test young hopefuls for aptitude before being let loose on the JP. This Harvard is a Mark IIB, bearing its correct serial of FS278, built by Nordine in Canada in 1943 and wearing a color scheme of the period. The Percival Provost entered RAF service in 1953. This particular one served at RAF Cranwell and at the College of Air Warfare at Manby. The Folland Gnat was an advanced trainer for the RAF, developed from a proposed single-seat fighter for NATO. The de Havilland Vampire first flew 6 months after the Meteor and just missed the war, entering service in the RAF shortly afterwards. The Gloucester Meteor was the first Allied jet fighter and the only one to see World War II service. It remained in RAF service for many years. The Hawker Hunter replaced the Meteor 8, the Venom and the Sabre. It was the first swept-wing RAF fighter and a really elegant gentleman's fighting carriage. The English Electric Canberra was the first British jet bomber. Like the Mosquito, it was unarmed, relying on speed to evade destruction. This Bristol Blenheim 4 is the only flying example in the world of what was in 1939 the RAF's most numerous aircraft type. It carries the markings of Wing Commander Max Aitken, son of Lord Beaverbrook. This Spitfire Mark IX ML407 is a famous aircraft. Now owned and displayed by Caroline Grace, it shot down the first enemy aircraft to be destroyed over the D-Day beaches. The Douglas DC-3 by 1939 had become the world's leading transport. Most of those built were military Dakotas. Some are still in scheduled service. This Douglas DC-6, with its huge 2,400 horsepower engines, is a freighter operated by Air Atlantique. It followed the DC-4, which was essentially a four-engine Dakota. Alas, time did not permit a longer look at these privately operated gems, but we did see a little more of the P-38 Lightning. This P-38J Lightning flew with the Army Air Forces from 1943 to 1945 and is operated in the markings of the period by the Fighter Collection at Duxford. It appears at Farnborough International 94 with the F-16 to mark the company's return to fighter production after over 50 years. A contemporary of the Lightning, both were designed long before America entered the war, was the B-17. Sally B, a Lockheed Vega-built B-17G, celebrating her 50th birthday in 1994, is undoubtedly the best known and probably the best loved vintage warbird in Europe. A film star in her own right, she appeared most recently in Memphis Belle and still carries the nose art on her starboard side. Bought in France by the late Ted White, she became the centerpiece of the Great Warbirds display and is kept flying by a devoted band of volunteers. 1994 is her 18th display season. These Blackburn-built Fairey Swordfish belong to the Naval Historic Flight. LS-326, trailing here, carries her original wartime grey and white markings of L Flight 836 Squadron, serving in the MAC ship Rapana. The upper aircraft here wears the colours of the CO of 810 Squadron in Ark Royal in 1939, with the temporary yellow stripes of the annual air exercises of that year. This Hawker Sea Fury in the colours of an Australian Navy aerobatic team is an FB-11 belonging to ex-Concorde captain John Bradshaw. The Hurricane entered service with Treble 1 Squadron at the end of 1937, and there were 19 squadrons equipped by the outbreak of war. The Spitfire joined the RAF with number 19 Squadron at the end of 1938. This aircraft is one of the two Spitfires that formed the original historic aircraft flight in 1957. Between 1942 and 1945, Lancasters equipped 62 Bomber Command squadrons. They dropped 608,000 tons of bombs and 5.5 million incendiaries, and they were the only aircraft capable of carrying the 10-ton earthquake bomb. This year, the Lancaster represents No. 9 Squadron, whose aircraft helped to sink the Tirpitz in 1944. The Hurricane, one of the first 12 flown off HMS Argus to reinforce Malta, and the Spitfire, in tribute to test pilots, the prototype Mark 14. International, Farnborough may have become, but British Aerospace still managed to hold the centre of the stage. In fact, inspired perhaps by the Lancaster, they have actually brought back the great name of Avro. Military business is conducted by British Aerospace Defence. Currently, no doubt, they are busy over a replacement for Nimrod, now in its 25th year. On the civil side, among their most important aircraft are these products of the Jetstream division, based at Prestwick, which is, of course, in Scotland. "27 have so far been delivered to 4 airlines, a major development of the Jetstream 31 series, of which 308 have been delivered. It has more powerful engines and 29 seats, 10 more than the J31. Launched in 1989 and with improved design weights and flat-rated engines, it has been available to customers since July 1994. Its hot and high performance is particularly good. Developed from the ATP. That said, it's a completely new design. So new, in fact, that it is being launched here at Farnborough, the first production aircraft flying in May 1994. The new cabin seats between 64 and 70 passengers, and British Aerospace are quietly confident that they have a winner in this class. The Islander has been one of the British success stories in recent years. Now part of Pilatus Britain Norman, the company announced several new sales at Farnborough International 94. "24 of these multi-role maritime patrol aircraft, capable of anti-submarine, anti-shipping and rescue duties, serve the RAF in 3 squadrons. This GR7 of the RAF, flown by Flight Lieutenant Rob Lee, has a new supercritical wing holding 50% more fuel and larger flaps linked to nozzle deflection for better short takeoff and landing. With leading-edge route extensions and lift improvement devices, these improvements give it twice the range or twice the load of the earlier versions. The larger, better vision cockpit gives room for improved avionics, and the Harrier 7 is now fully equipped for night attack tasks. To the familiar strains of Chariots of Fire, the Hawks line up for the dramatic major presentation by British Aerospace Defence. The 14 Hawks are marked with the flags and the names of their customers to date: the Royal Air Force, Finland, Kenya, Indonesia, Zimbabwe, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, the United States Navy, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Korea, Oman, and Malaysia. Twelve of the 14 aircraft in this broad arrow formation, representing the British Aerospace logo, are from number 4 FTS at Valley. Flown by RAF instructors, they're wearing their new high conspicuity black livery. The other two, in company grey, are the latest export models. This is the two-seat 100, 40 of these already serving with 3 nations. The light fighter single-seat 200, of which 44 are in use, is also serving with 3 customers. Among the international ranks for the first time was South Africa, whose enforced isolation has fostered an important aerospace industry. National presentations, in fact, made up large sections of the halls. There can be no better illustration of would-be East-West cooperation than CIS missiles on Eagles, Hornets, and Harriers. It would not be an understatement to say that Russia has stolen the show at Farnborough since 1986, and 1994 was no exception. This Russian U-2 was originally ordered with a single engine by the MOD to destroy automatic drifting balloons sent over by the CIA. The new twin-engine version, with a service ceiling of 13 miles and an endurance between 6 and 7 hours, is engaged currently in very high-altitude ozone-level monitoring flights. It has participated in the Italian airborne polar experiment, and it holds 16 world records for altitude and payload to height. Shown at Dubai in 1993, the L139 makes its first Farnborough appearance. It was developed from the L39, of which nearly 3,000 had been sold up to 1994. And while the new aircraft is unlikely to repeat that success, 17 countries flew the L39 and might well be expected to latch on to its successor. From Poland comes this brand new export version of the Irida, which replaced the old J-11 Iskra aerobatic jet trainer. It is powered by two Rolls-Royce Vipers with reheat, and Pesatel and Rolls-Royce have launched a joint marketing campaign to sell the Irida abroad. This is the second prototype of this transcontinental wide-bodied business jet, the latest member of Dassault's successful family of civil jets, which flew for the first time 2 weeks before the show. Flight Refueling Aviation used 22 of these Falcon 20s for electronic training and target towing for the Royal Navy. One of the pilots flying at Farnborough is the daughter of the immortal Lee Jones, founder of the Red Arrows. Saab of Sweden are offering a budget-price airborne early warning and control aircraft wrapped around the new Ericsson Eri mission system. An adaptation of the popular Saab 340B, the seats are replaced by a command and control system. The operational end of the Eri is in the long, ram air-cooled coffin above the fuselage. This single turboprop business and executive transport, in production since 1990 with 125 ordered, is unusual among singles in having a pressurized cabin. The private venture Omega is a straight turboprop conversion of the earlier Epsilon trainer, most of which will probably be converted. With 1,150 shaft horsepower, the PC-9 has probably the best performance in its class. It serves in the Far East and in the German, Swiss and Australian Air Forces, and it's licence-built in Oz. Pilatus are moving into a new field with their latest civil aircraft, a single-engine pressurised turboprop. Production began in 1994, and orders and options had reached 44 by Farnborough time. Using many components from the Piper Cherokee series, this Chilean trainer covers basic, intermediate, aerobatic and instrument training. If there is one thing the South African aerospace industry has learnt, it is self-reliance. Latest offer from Atlas is this two-seat trainer. Built of carbon fibre materials, it is on offer with engines of 750 or 1200 horsepower for either basic or advanced training. We stay with South Africa as we introduce attack helicopters, and particularly the contenders to replace the Lynx in British Army Air Corps service. Designed and built by Atlas Corporation for the South African Air Force, this anti-tank chopper was developed from the French Puma. Following South Africa's recent return into the world market, interest in her arms industry, especially in the Rooivalk, is being shown by several other countries. With its emphasis on battlefield survival and state-of-the-art class cockpit and avionics, it also features armor, infrared emission suppressors, and very considerable agility. Eurocopter is a merger of the rotary wing interests of Aerospatiale in France and MBB in Germany, and Tiger is their first new design. Flying at Farnborough was the first of 3 prototypes currently evaluating weapons. The Triget fire and forget anti-tank missiles can be fired from cover using the mast-mounted sights. $450 Tigers will be required for France and Germany, and the aircraft is a contender for the UK attack helicopter programme in conjunction with British Aerospace. The Super Cobra is favoured by some for the British order, but considered too small by others. The current favourite, though, is the Apache, fronted by Westland. It didn't fly at the show, so we'll take a commercial break. Although it was not, alas, in the flying display, one must take note of the admirable and combat-proven Apache, the top gun of the helicopter world, according to a recent video. Now, from the incidental aerobatics of the attack helicopters to aircraft for which such things are a way of life. This 360 horsepower aerobatic aircraft, light, very strong and very powerful, comes out ahead in any attitude you care to name, and some of its more complex maneuvers don't have names at that. The first all-composite production trainer in the world, up to 113 Fireflies, will go to the United States Air Force as the T-3A grading aircraft for the JPADS program.
And therefore up to 113 of the aircraft as the lead-in type of the in-service JPADS program, the Joint Primary Aircraft Training System.
Shorts have long been running the Royal Navy's pilot grading scheme, and when the last chipmunk left naval service on the 31st of March 1994, they replaced it with this little beauty, needing only 5 to do the work done by 10 chippies. A multi-stage trainer from Finland, the Radigo will accept 2 extra seats for a communications role, carry target towing gear or a stretcher. 6 hardpoints accommodating a modest quantity of ordnance considerably enhance its training value. This charismatic light twin, designed and flown by Peter Phillips, is distinctly unusual. The tandem seats, more like a Hawk than your average Spam can, will give a 6-foot pilot 5 inches of headroom. It has a tail wheel, it handles and performs beautifully, and of course it is fully aerobatic. An unusual feature of Farnborough International 94 was the competition for the 5th leg of the Breitling World Cup. Top aerobatic pilots flying top competition aircraft, including the winners of several world events, fought it out in the Farnborough skies. A unique function of the state-of-the-art of these light, powerful and advanced aircraft is their ability to enter and sustain maneuvers that have never been in the book. Prominent among the aerobatic aircraft is the latest French Bouderie Cap 321, flown by several of the competitors. Current favourite for world honours in aerobatics is the Sukhoi Su-26 from Moscow and its later derivatives. Perhaps the most astounding aspect of these new aircraft is their ability to maneuver freely at, or apparently below, the stall. Joris Karis from Lithuania, here landing the Sukhoi, was the eventual winner. He will be long remembered for his devastating rolling display at Farnborough International '92. Down at the other end of the scale, to borrow from Tim Rice, is Brian Lacombe in a high-drag, low-power vintage Stomp biplane. Accompanying him, and the other half of the Firebird aerobatics display, is Alan Wade in the Pitt Special. Once World Championship class, the design of this little biplane is now 50 years old. If art is the imitation of nature, then the Arrows have got it hacked. Sadly, this was almost the last time I was to introduce squadron leader Lesgar Saidbiti as the narrator for the Red Arrows. After this season, he would vanish from the commentating scene at the end of his tour. Every Arrows show seems better than the last, but 1994 will be memorable for its pace and complexity. Like Concorde, the Arrows need no introduction, and like Concorde, they stop the traffic.
The aims of today's combat sortie in Eurofighter are to attack and neutralize a vital enemy bridge, to conduct a combat air patrol, and during the mission, we'll be carrying out some air-to-air refueling.
At times, you will see the action through the eyes of the pilot. The green symbology on the screen is what the pilot sees through his wide-angle head-up display.
It was not perhaps surprising that quite the most popular spot on the ground at Farnborough was that mission simulator for the EF-2000 in the British Aerospace Complex. The first prototype flew this year, but not, unfortunately, at the show. This is the British prototype making its first flight at Wharton. Deliveries for air defence and ground attack duties are expected around the year 2002. The RAF order, subject to any financial interventions, was for 250.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the future. A future that is a reality today.
When France pulled out of the Eurofighter program, work went ahead on Dassault's Rafale for the French Air Force and the French Navy. Combining the advanced Delta with active foreplanes, much use has been made of the latest techniques in carbon fiber, Kevlar and titanium. For an empty weight of 9 tons, Rafale will lift 8 tons of weaponry on 14 stations. Dassault were pioneers in the advanced Delta wing for fighting aircraft, taking full advantage of new aerodynamic techniques and fly-by-wire, and Mirage Deltas have sold well. A light multi-role combat aircraft, of which so far nearly 400 from an order book of 550 have been delivered. 160 plus are employed by the French Air Force alone. A highly modified research platform, this Tornado from the Defense Research Agency sports the familiar raspberry ripple color scheme. Based at Boscombe Down, this aircraft, like all the others in the DRA fleet, is available to customers for collaborative scientific research projects. Basically, Tornado, of course, is a variable geometry aircraft and the mainstay of the Royal Air Force Strike Force. A single-engine, multi-role fighter of very advanced aerodynamics and low weight, Lockheed claimed this to be one of the world's most highly effective and technologically advanced combat aircraft. As nearly 4,000 have been ordered and 3,500 delivered, and it is flown by 19 air forces all over the world, they are quite probably right. This aircraft is unusual in filling both the fighter and attack roles for the US Navy, replacing the F-4 Phantom fighter and the A-7 Corsair in the attack role. Its speed, maneuverability and acceleration and modern weapons make it superior in either class. It is very reliable and easy to maintain. Attack missions can be made day or night in all weathers, and its fly-by-wire agility and acceleration give it the edge on an airborne adversary. It is still in production to fulfill export orders from India, Iraq, Syria and Yugoslavia, Korea and what was then East Germany. The latest order from Malaysia was concluded in 1994. Latest models have digital fly-by-wire, and new equipment has considerably altered its general outline. Smaller and lighter than the big Sukhois, the MiG-29 is extremely agile and a very, very competent frontline aircraft. We have had the flankers at Farnborough before, dazzling us with their improbable aerobatic displays. This year they are back, the Su-35 in the flying program for the first time, and with a brand new model, the Su-30MK. We invite you to enjoy the flanker finale. This was the first of the splendid Sukhoi fighting carriages. The Russians insist that the bell, or tail slide, the cobra, and the hook, which is a knife-edge cobra, those curiosities in the repertoire of large military machinery, are not circus tricks, but what they call low-speed combat maneuvering. However, in the hands of the great Anatoly Kvatcho, they are still spectacular to us. Just watch his display. Deployment with the Russian Air Forces of this awesome all-weather fighter and attack single-seater is planned for 1995. Four tons of weapons were carried on the 14 store stations for its demonstration at Farnborough. The four planes, working away like a seal's flippers in the more extreme maneuvers, were first used on a naval folding-wing version of the Su-27, with which, apart from the naval equipment, the Su-35 has much in common. In the Hook, which is a knife-edged Cobra and quite bewildering, it's meant to be in combat, an alpha pitch of up to 140 degrees can take place. There have always been innumerable updates and variations on Russian military aircraft, with the usual bewildering crop of roll suffixes, so it is perhaps no surprise that the Su-30 is newer than the Su-35. This big, solid interceptor and attack aircraft went through its aerobatic routine more like an Su-29, despite carrying 7,000 kilograms of inert weapons, 7/8 of a full load. Sukhoi are not content with amazing us with these maneuvers by conventional aircraft. There is even a STOL version of the Su-35 with vectored thrust tailpipes. Perhaps it will join us at Farnborough International 96. We close with a brief tribute to the DRA crash and rescue services, seldom needed, usually ignored, but always available if required.
when does an air show really become a real air show? The answer? There has to be an aerobatic team display. That's why the editors of Aviation Week magazine have put together great aerobatic teams of the world. This video doesn't settle just on one team. It gives you 6, and they're the best 6 in the world. From Europe, the Patrouille de France, consisting of pilots from the French Air Force. The Italian team, Frecce Tricolori. Not only will you see the red arrows, but also displays from their North American rivals, the Snowbirds. The Blue Angels. And finally, from America, the Thunderbirds. "60 full minutes of non-stop excitement. Just $12.99 plus £2 postage and packaging. Order your copy of Great Aerobatic Teams of the World today." Millions all over the world thrilled to see airshow displays year after year. In Great Air Shows of the World, the editors of Aviation Week magazine bring you 4 of the greatest: Farnborough, Paris, Dayton and Oshkosh. You'll see more of these shows on this video than you would have seen had you been there. By watching this video, you'll certainly learn more as Aviation Week gets authoritative interviews with pilots and manufacturers of today's top jets. Of course, you'll see Stealth and all the other aircraft participants of the Gulf War. There's also a memorable shot of the 1989 Paris crash of the MiG-29. A 60-minute world tour. The Great Air Shows of the World. $12.99 plus £2 postage and package. Wings of the World. A remarkable video. 109 minutes of flying with 99 different displays. An encyclopedia of flight. You won't find another video like it, with performances from 25 air shows. Everything from warbirds to the SR-71, including aerobatic teams from 6 countries. And you will see plenty of the barnstormers of flying circus fame. There's also an exclusive look at an F-4 breaking the sound barrier. All this for only $12.99 plus £2 postage and packaging. Get your copy of Wings of the World today. The biannual Farnborough International Air Show is one of the world's greatest showcases for the aviation industry. Although primarily a trade show, the last 3 days of the exhibition are open to the public, where they have the opportunity to witness dazzling displays by the world's most advanced civil and military aircraft. Hosted by the renowned commentator John Blake and presented by Ed Mitchell, the viewer is taken to the limits of aviation technology. Contrasting with the action is a series of in-depth interviews with the pilots, manufacturers and the people who make the world of aviation. The Red Arrows, 25 spectacular years. This video is one of its kind, especially produced by veteran aerial photographer, the late Arthur Gibson. It does honor to the world's finest aerobatic team. Others can film the Red Arrows, but only Arthur Gibson can show you 2 complete displays. First in the saucy little gnats of the early days, and then in the powerful hawks of today. Raymond Baxter interviews the team leaders of 1965 and the 90s. Red Arrows, 25 spectacular years, the only video of its kind. Popularly priced at $9.99. 45 minutes with hardly a chance to catch your breath. Order your copy today. Jaguar, Nimrod, Buccaneer, Tornado. The very names excite. Britain's Gulf Quartet. 4 separate films, each devoted to a single aircraft, and each running just under 30 minutes. Almost 2 hours of action entertainment in 2 cassettes, all for $14.99. You see each plane not just over some airfield, but in the air on actual training missions. You sit in on the crew briefings, hear the flight commander's crisp commands. See the operation of modern electronic wizardry in control of every maneuver. All the filming was commissioned by the Ministry of Defense and has never before been given general public release. Don't miss out. Order now.